It's been a while. The past 6 or so months of the cosmic scavenger hunt have been probably some of the most life-changing, very inward experiences that I've had. And I'm feeling inspired and energized enough to share a bit about what's been happening since last time I shared. Where to begin? This scavenger hunt, if you're watching this on YouTube, I released 12 episodes of my podcast on the podcast platforms. Some of the context of what I'll share is in those episodes. I'll try to link to take you on your own little scavenger hunt if you want some of the background, but I'll try to give a bit of the shortest version I can. One thing I'm accepting and embracing about myself is that I don't tell short stories. This is my neurospiciness on fire, and it's something that I have masked and tried to change about myself. And I realize that the people who resonate with me tell stories the same way and like to hear all of the details. So I'm going to do that. And if it's not for you, put it on 2x speed or skip past. Let's rewind. So at the end of last year, I had gotten guidance from my guides from the Galactic Federation that it was time for me to take some big action. I needed to move house. They advised me to sell my remaining company shares from my old corporate lifetime and to invest in gold, which ended up becoming silver, gold, Bitcoin, and that it was time for me to take it up a notch in my business. Sometimes the clues they give you are actually to push you to a breaking point, and that's exactly what happened for me. So I hired a VA and a business coach, and I felt really inspired, and I had received the transition transmissions, and I was like, yes, my mission, it's here, I'm ready, let's go. What actually ended up happening was I burnt out again. And in the process of that burnout, which I fought really hard, this feeling has had many names for me throughout the years. Sometimes it felt like depression. Sometimes it was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And this one was like so much more intense than anything I have ever experienced before. I literally couldn't get out of bed. It started right after I had a pretty intense experience with a medicine container I was in, and I chose to leave it. I was meant to be traveling around the east coast of Australia in my camper van and living my best gap life, and I just couldn't even muster any energy to do anything. And then I was beating myself up because it's like, oh my gosh, you have this opportunity and you're not doing anything. And the old stories about how sad and lazy and depressed I was came back to kind of try to whip me into shape and, don't let this opportunity pass by. And that feeling extended through January when I had my kids. I was trying really hard to make school holidays feel different for them. And the first week I had lots of things planned, and then I crashed again. And I just had no energy for anything. Previously and in this experience, when I'm in that space, there is this heaping load of judgment, self-judgment that I place on myself. I also hide away from the world. I'm constantly trying to figure out what's wrong, what's going on. And I had been receiving clues from the algorithm oracles on social media for probably 2 years about ADHD and autism and ADHD. I kind of was like, yeah, I'm sure I've got a little bit of that. But there were quite a few clues that actually led me to realizing, no, there's definitely something here, and it might actually be explaining why you feel the way that you do, because you've been masking for your entire life and you're fucking exhausted. And so you might be just really burnt out. And so that was what led me to the point of seeking ADHD diagnosis. At the time, I did a self-assessment that pointed pretty directly towards ADHD, which was a little bit surprising to me because I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm ADHD. But anyway, I was like, maybe medication, which I had resisted up until that point, maybe that will help me get out of this hole. And so I sought a fast track diagnosis because I was desperate to feel differently. And so on my 45th birthday, I was diagnosed with ADHD by a specialist ADHD clinic. And it was so validating in so many ways. It helped explain so much of what had been happening for me throughout my life. And it was only part of the picture, but it was an important step. And again, just like the clue was go hard on your business, which ignited my old way of going hard, which I call go mode, led by the taskmaster part. That was leading me to the point of seeing that the way that I was living was unsustainable. And especially, I made all these changes to my life over the last 6 years to change my lifestyle and remove myself from toxic relationships and environments, and really creating a sanctuary around myself so that I could heal and reclaim my energy and all of this. And yet it was still happening. I was like, okay, what is going on? I had started my soul-led business. My mission has become clearer and clearer. I feel really inspired and motivated. And yet there was like something, I'm standing at the threshold and I could feel myself wanting to make a bigger impact. And yet there was some part of me that was standing there going like, how in the world are you going to do that? You're a single mom. You are struggling to keep everything going, even just with like the pretty light client load you have. Although that was a fallacy, because even though the number of clients was low, the amount of overgiving I was doing was unsustainable. So all of these clues led me to the breaking point, essentially. So after my diagnosis, I tried stimulant medication, and I know stimulants work really well for lots of people. For me, they were really excellent at helping me with like executive function type tasks, getting started on things that I would normally completely procrastinate on, especially, like really annoying life admin or communication that's complicated with other people, or, just even starting something that I want to work on, but the perfectionism stopping me. I don't know even how to start this because it needs to be perfect. So it helped with those types of things. And that was one of the main things I was seeking support for. What it didn't help with was emotional regulation. It actually made it worse for me. Fatigue. Oh my gosh, this was the thing that made me go, okay, I'm not sure this is working. And it didn't help with the overall picture of my life. And I was still feeling really burnt out. But of course, on stimulant medication, I did move house. I took my kids to Japan on my own. What in the hell was I thinking? Just making sure I was actually recording. Can you imagine? That would be such an ADHD thing to do. I had this fantasy of wanting to show my kids the world. And they had really been wanting to go to Japan. And when I was in the thick of the burnout, I was like, I don't know how in the world that's going to happen. But I knew that like March, April of this year was the ideal timing for cherry blossom season. So if we didn't go, then it's going to be another year. And so on the medication and with the help of Claude AI, I planned a 2-week solo trip with my kids around Japan. And that was, to be honest, like one of the hardest things I've ever done. There were glimmers of beautiful moments and experiences that we had together. But for me and my 2 undiagnosed spicy children, the sensory overload, the different language, unfamiliar foods. We were moving around every few days. We were moving to a new hotel, a new place. It was a lot. It was too much. And we would only be able to do about a half a day of activities. And then we needed the whole afternoon to recover from it. And I was beating myself up because I'm like, well, we're here and we should be doing more. And I should be encouraging them to try more Japanese foods rather than ordering Uber Eats so that I know they'll eat something. And just the pressure that I was putting on myself. And I did get to a point on that trip where I just massively lowered my expectations for the type of trip that it was going to be. And we actually had a few brilliant experiences. Like, one thing that I really wanted to do was kintsugi. Hang on one second, let me show you something. The metaphor about kintsugi and mending things with gold, broken things, showing the seams, showing the repairs, and that it makes it more strong and more beautiful rather than like hiding and trying to take it back to perfection, has been something that's really resonated for me in my life and in my business, my livelihood. And so this was something I really wanted to do. So I found a workshop while we were in Kyoto, and I was bracing myself for at least one of the children hating it and me not actually being able to enjoy the experience. But to my surprise and delight, all three of us loved it. It was the one thing that we all enjoyed. And finding something that is like a mutual site of pleasure and satisfaction for the three of us is almost impossible. So that was amazing. And then we ended up tufting as well. One second, let me get something else. I tufted this. We all had such fun. We got to use the tufting gun, and it was like, it was hours of concentration and some frustration, and we all moved through it because we just were really enjoying it. And so we found a few things that we really enjoyed doing together. And so that was brilliant. And it was also a great opportunity to just observe the three of us and notice just how sensitive we each are, and how, it felt like the kids were passing the baton of who was going to have a meltdown. And it like seemed to always coincide with when there was someplace I wanted to go, which is really funny because the metaphor that came through when I was in burnout at the beginning of the year was that I was in the well. I asked my inner child what was going on for her, and she had told me that she was in the well. And it has now connected with a goddess, Bridget, who I've been working with, and she is connected to the sacred wells of Ireland, which I had no idea about. But when we were in Tokyo, I think it was Tokyo, we went to find a sacred well, and we just could not find it. And it ended up becoming this like battle of wills between me and my daughter, and it was a nightmare. And by the time we even found the well, I was like, I don't even want to be here anymore. It also made me think about how I was as a kid and how sensitive I was to lights and sounds and textures and all of these things that were clues that helped lead me to my ADHD diagnosis and to, suspecting that I'm actually ADHD. That trip, I got back, and then my kids were with their dad for like 12 days for school holidays. And again, the taskmaster was there like, great, now it's time to get back to work. You've taken enough time off. It's time to start creating more content. You've got all of this time. You should. And you know what? My body said, lay down on the couch and rest. And I was like, no, but I had no choice. I had to do it. So that's what I did. I rested almost that entire time, but I fought against it. And what I've learned is when you are fighting against rest, even if it looks like rest, it's not restful. And I was doing ceremonies with my friend and doing some Akashic Records sessions with different friends, and a lot more about the mission dropped in. And so I'm feeling like, oh yeah, like I can feel the fire, and that we're in the fire horse year now, and I should be feeling, more motivated and energized. But there was just this like brick wall that wouldn't let me move forward. And it was related to my body and fatigue. And I would say that getting in tune with my body and what it's telling me has been a part of the process that has taken a lot longer for me on my journey. It's partially because I'm a triple Aquarius and I like to live up here. It's partially because of trauma in my background and living in dissociation and fight or flight and freeze for a lot of my life. But returning to my body has been this conscious practice that I've been embracing for years. But this year, my body went, that's enough. You literally won't be able to do anything else until you tend to what's happening. And it gave me that message through fatigue. So what I was noticing was that when the stimulant medication wore off in the afternoon, and I couldn't take it too late in the day because then it was messing with my sleep. When it wore off in the afternoon, everything felt worse than without the medication. So my mood was worse, my energy was worse, my ability to focus was like non-existent. Luckily, when I got all of the guidance around moving and kicking it into another notch, they also told me that I needed to bring in more support. So I'd hired a nanny to help me 2 days a week and to help with some of the housework. And I'd gotten some systems down that were helping me simplify. I had accepted the fact that cooking meals, and especially when I have to cook multiple different meals for me and the kids, because they're picky and they don't want to eat the same thing. The executive function strain of that was like my breaking point. And so I just really accepted that I needed to simplify things as much as I could. I found a great like plant-based, high protein delivery service for me that's actually cheaper than cooking for myself. I'm like, you know what? That's okay. I'm just going to do that and make it simple. I have just started doing the same meals for the kids on, like almost like a schedule, and just accepted that this is where we're at. It's not to say that, maybe in the future I will have the energy to start cooking again and, going through the pain of trying to get my son to try different things. But right now, I was in survival mode. Like, I just had to make sure we were fed, and accepting that about myself, because a big part of what has come up through this whole period, I've been calling it the reconfiguration. So when I got the diagnosis, this is like another awakening, right? Like, and I've been through this, I don't know how many times now, where something massive shifts and you have to go back and re-examine everything you thought you knew about yourself. And this has been just on another level, to the point where I decided consciously that I was going to allow everything to be up for review, including like my business. Like, is this what I want to be doing? Is this how I want to be doing it? Is this even who I am? Even the things that I like about myself, are they a coping mechanism? Am I masking? Really allowing myself to not be too attached to anything. Of course, I've lost my train of thought. Where was I? Reconfiguration. Oh, yes. Motherhood. So one of the biggest things that I realized was, for me, the masking is completely intertwined with shame. I'm assuming that's common for most people. We mask because we believe that some part of us isn't acceptable, isn't lovable, isn't worthy, that will be rejected if people see it. And for a lot of us, we learn this so young. Like, I think for me, I was pre-verbal when I learned to start masking. And one of my core wounds is around motherhood. I had this very rigid belief that I had to completely rewrite what happened in my childhood. First, by doing the exact opposite, which created my old life, like, okay, my mom was a single mom, so I need to be married when I have kids. I need to make sure that I have a really good career, and I've, done the capitalist playbook to a T before I have children, and then everything will be great and their life will be different than mine. But then it became this pressure that I put on myself. And then even as I, had my awakening and I became a spiritual person, or like a spiritual mentor and leader who's sharing my thoughts about how to navigate the scavenger hunt, I felt like I had this dirty little secret, which is, oh my gosh, in so many ways, I'm not the type of mother that I believe I should be. We don't eat exclusively organic and wear only linen, and my kids are on devices and I yell at them sometimes, and we sleep trained our kids when they were babies, like these things that I'm like, oh my gosh, if my conscious sisters knew this about me, they would think that I'm a complete fraud. And because I'm doing these things, I'm setting my kids up for failure in the future. The catastrophization that happens in my mind about these things, especially on the core wound things, was so intense that I couldn't even imagine sharing some of these things, even with my closest friends. But again, things needed to get to a breaking point because I couldn't go on like that, because another, belief that I have based on my human experience is that I'm unsupported and I'm doing it all alone. And I was creating that environment because I'm like, well, I can't show this part of myself to anyone. I have to do it alone, because if they saw what's actually going on here, then they would not want to be friends with me anymore. Like, that was the kind of belief that I had. And it was eating me alive. And it was yet another reason why, even though on the surface I'm resting because I'm not working, I wasn't really resting because I was constantly in fear and anxiety about how my mistakes as a mother were impacting my children, or how I was never going to have enough energy to actually do the work that I wanted to do and be the type of mother that I want to be, and still having something for myself, and let alone like trying to have some type of relationship, a romantic relationship in the future. I was like, how in the world is all of this going to happen? And at the same time, my higher self and my guides and my vision, I know that it's not only possible, but it's my destiny to have all of those things and more. But from where I was sitting, I was like, how in the world is this going to happen? So I'm wondering if maybe I should just pause there for a second. Yeah, I feel like that's a really good place to pause. And that's kind of the background. I haven't even gotten to what's happened, but I'll share that next.